Hello Scavengers, and thanks a lot for your continued support. However, I haven't had enough questions from you yet. I'm still trying to figure out what I can be talking about. So I'll say thanks to Omar because you promised you're going to send a question. And apart from that, I'm going to make this up as I go along. So, what sort of things do people like to ask me normally? I think the obvious thing is, how do I research? Right, well, how do I research? I get to read lots of books. Lots and lots of books. I've mentioned this one earlier on in the Templars talk, but you can't really get by without doing a lot of research. It's essential. Now, I have had one situation which I like to talk about, and that is that when you're doing research, you often don't know where your research is going to lead you. You have an idea for a story, and you go down that track, but in fact, it doesn't work, and you don't know why. Sometimes you also have other problems. For example, one issue that I always have is I find it really difficult to write short, concise stories. I can't do poetry to save my life. I am good when you say 70,000, 80,000, 100,000 words. I can write you a novel. I can write a novel in about 2 months without any problem at all. If it's 70,000 words, I can normally write that in about a month to 6 weeks. I'm hoping that's the case now because I've got to finish this one by the end of November. Still, never mind. Writing a novel, no problem. Writing a short story, that's an issue. I find short stories really difficult because you've got to encapsulate a whole lot into a much shorter body of text, somewhere between 5 and 10,000 words normally. So that's an issue. Even harder is trying to work out what a good title is, because a good title is going to attract people to the book. It's going to give them a certain feel for the type of book you're writing. I think One Last Dance Before I Die, that says a lot. It, to me, sums up the 1920s crime story. It's got a lot going for it. I like that title. Other titles I don't think were quite so good. The Boy Bishop's Glovemaker, for example, doesn't really rattle off the tongue, sounding as though it's going to be a good crime novel as such. Most people are just going to look at it and think, what on earth is a boy bishop? And why has he got a glovemaker? Which perhaps would work, I don't know. It might work well enough just on that basis. But I do know that once I had a really good idea for a title. I thought I could call a book Widdecombe Fair, because in the UK, Widdecombe Fair down in Dartmoor is very famous. There's been a number of songs written about it. There's been a number of tales about it. The basic idea was Uncle Tom Cobley and all had to ride a horse to Widdecombe Fair. And that's the basis of the song, really. The song is mostly a list of all the different people riding with Tom Cobley and all. So I thought that was good. And I suggested it to my agent. She said, oh yes, that's a good idea. And she put it forward to my agent, and to my editor, and she said that she liked it. So, okay, I was going to write a book about Widdecombe Fair. So I went to the British Library, and this is the good old days when it was the big circular room as part of the British Museum. It had one big circular chamber with desks radiating inwards from the outer walls like the spokes of a wheel. And each of the desks, there were 3 or 4 deep, and each of them had powder blue leather all over the top. Beautiful things. There were powder blue leather chairs to sit in while you were working, and if you pulled a little powder blue leather tab in front of you, this long disjointed looking cast iron thing came out, which popped out and it became a bookrest at eye level, so you could put your book there and read what you needed to do while writing. In the middle of it, where the axle would have been for the circular room, there were a series of concentric desks. Right in the middle, there was a set of desks for librarians, where they would stand inside the middle of the desk and could answer your questions. Outside that, there was a second ring, and this had damn great ledgers. You can't see where my hands are, but that hand's there. that hand's there. And these ledgers were, I guess, about 2 feet high, 18 inches wide, all massive tomes, all leather bound, and inside them, line by line, on the inner circle were the names of all the different authors that they had in the library. So you had all these different authors' names that you could run through and find the author you wanted. The second concentric ring out from that was another set of identical ledgers, but on this lot they had sort of the word in text Google search, if you like, on paper. So it wasn't very Google-like at all. But if you wanted to look up, for example, markets, there was a line for markets, and then you could look up underneath markets, medieval markets or 20th century markets, London markets, whatever it might be, and there'd be a separate reference for each of those. So you could look up various different things. I always found it, there goes my phone, I always found it a fascinating place to visit. Absolutely wonderful. It had a marvellous, marvellous atmosphere. It was just glorious. And the modern British Library is not the same. It's a red brick building up near St Pancras, and it's got no atmosphere. It's got low ceilings. You go in there, you ask for your books, you sit down, and a book will arrive in about half an hour, which is great. In the old library, you'd ask for a book and it might take 3 days to arrive, because most of the books weren't stored in the British Library. They were stored off-site in an old RAF base or American Air Force base in Lancashire, because it was much cheaper storage up there, but it did mean you had to wait for the books to arrive. So when I had this idea about Widdecombe Fair, I thought, that's great, I'll go up to the British Library. So I went up to the big powder blue British Library, had my pens. You can't take pens into the new British Library or bags, but in the old one you could. And so I sat down with my pens and started checking up for books, and it took 10 days or so to realise I was getting nowhere, because I found not one single book that could help me about Widdecombe Fair in the 1320s. And it's not surprising, because an awful lot of information, medieval information, has been submitted to the library, and they haven't got the archivists to actually go through it all and decide what's relevant. There's also the fact that Hitler did his best in 1940-44 to try to burn the place down. And there's also the fact that in the 1800s it was flooded 2 or 3 times. So there have been problems for the British Library. But I didn't think that was enough of an excuse. I searched everywhere and got nothing at all. So I came back down to Devon and spent a load more days. I went through Exeter University. I went to the Devon and Exeter Institution. I went to the Devon and Cornwall Record Society. I went to the Archive Office. I went to the Devon Folk Customs Library. I went everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Still nothing whatsoever. And in the end I was talking to an archivist and I said, can you give me any advice? Where can I go for more information on markets in the 1320s? And she said, I don't know, but she said, try the cathedral librarian, because he knows everything. I thought, fine. So I phoned up the cathedral librarian and had a conversation that went roughly along the lines of, hello, my name's Michael Jackson. I'm trying to find out anything I can about Widdecombe Fair in the 1320s. And he said, oh, you'll find that difficult. And I said, yes, I'd noticed. Can you tell me why? He said, yes. Widdecombe Fair started 1820. I thought, oh no. And that is the problem with research. You start off with the best of intentions, you go right down a standard route, and then you find that there's a complete dead end because you are researching entirely the wrong thing. So I discovered that Widdecombe Fair didn't exist, which is why when you read the Abbot's Gibbet, you'll discover that I redirected everything to Goosey Fair at Tavistock, because that did exist. Abbot Robert Champeau was quite happy to keep on making... Sorry, I just noticed someone over the road who's banging on doors. He's probably going to come and bang on this one shortly. So Abbot Robert Champeau had Goosey Fair going from very early in the 1300s, so no problem with that at all, thank goodness. But most of my research now is conducted here at home, reason being it's an awful lot cheaper. So I can buy books on the internet, have them delivered here, and it's considerably cheaper than spending the money on a train fare going all the way up to London, the British Library, and then coming back here later. although there are appealing aspects to going out to the British Library. I've got to just mention one thing now. Last week, while I was in London with the Smithsonian Journeys tour, I was delighted to meet Simon Brett while I was up there. If you hadn't heard of Simon Brett, he is an enormously witty, amusing character. He gives marvellous talks. This is a book based on some of his work called Lines of Inquiry, and it's mostly based on an adaptation of a crime story that he's made that's a tongue-in-cheek spoof, all in rhyme, about a crime story. Quite amazing. How someone can do things like that in rhyme, I do not know. I can't write a single haiku, let alone a full-length poem. But he's managed to make a complete crime story, and the whole thing is poetry. It's perfect. And when he gives talks at events, he very often does this kind of work where he'll just do a one-man show all about a crime story that he's written. So if you ever get a chance to see Simon Brett, that's very well worthwhile. It was delightful meeting him again, though. He was for many years the president of the Detection Club, which is the gathering of mad crime writers like me and others. And the current president of the Detection Club is another friend of mine, Martin Edwards, who wrote this fabulous book, which hopefully you can just see there, which is The Golden Age of Murder. And this is a book that's been written more or less as a detection story in its own right, all about Dorothy L. Sayers, Agatha Christie, G.K. Chesterton, Knox, goodness knows who else, all of them the founder members of the Detection Club in about 1928, although the first official meeting was 1932. The Detection Club still exists. I am the honorary secretary. I hope you're bowing and looking impressed now. But the great thing about the Detection Club is it's a forum where crime writers of a certain age, now I'm getting old, can meet up. And the whole concept is that it exists for crime writers to have 3 good meals a year. I can't think of many better reasons for existing. Sadly, I've had to miss the last 2 or 3 meetings because of pressure of work, finances and goodness knows what else, but I hope to be returning to the Detection Club before too long. And in the meantime, I'm not going to be allowed to go back if I don't get another book written. So I'm now going to knock off before that guy knocks on the door and sets the dogs berserk, and before the deadline gets too close for Jack Blackjack Bloody Mary 5. I'm going to go back to work now. Thanks a lot for watching. Hope that was some interest. Do please send me some questions, because I can't keep whittering on about my own work like this. It's just embarrassing. And I look forward to speaking to you in a month's time or so, when hopefully this book will be finished. Help. Thanks a lot for watching. Take care. Cheers.